Delete it now. His voice came through the phone like a blade, quiet, controlled, and absolutely furious. Sophia had answered, expecting a scheduling update. Instead, Damian Moretti, the most feared man in Chicago, was ordering her to erase a photo from her own social media. A photo of her laughing with a childhood friend. Her hand tightened around the phone. 3 years of working beside this man, and he had never once crossed into her personal life. Until tonight. Something in his voice wasn't anger. It was something far more dangerous. If this story already has you hooked, subscribe to our channel right now and follow every twist until the very end, and drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Sophia Bellini had made exactly one rule for herself when she accepted the position as executive assistant to Damian Moretti 3 years ago. Keep it professional. It wasn't a complicated rule. It wasn't even a difficult one most days. She showed up early, stayed late, managed the impossible architecture of a billionaire's schedule, and kept her personal life in a completely separate compartment, sealed, locked, and far away from the glass towers and mahogany boardrooms where Damian Moretti conducted his official business. His unofficial business she had learned to stop asking about. Not because she was afraid of the answer. Sophia Bellini had never been particularly afraid of anything, a quality that had served her well in a city like Chicago, where fear was currency, and most people spent it freely. She stopped asking because she understood somewhere in the first 6 months of working beside him that the answer didn't change what she already knew. Damian Moretti was dangerous. He was also in ways that no one who feared him would ever believe, one of the most disciplined and deeply private men she had ever encountered. Those two facts lived inside her simultaneously, and she had learned to hold them both without letting either one destabilize her. Until the night of the Whitmore Foundation Gala. The event was held on the 42nd floor of the Meridian Hotel, a charity auction that raised funds for children's hospitals across the Midwest. Damian was supposed to attend himself. He had confirmed the reservation 3 weeks in advance, reviewed the guest list twice, and personally approved the donation amount his company would pledge during the live auction portion of the evening. Then, at 4:17 that afternoon, he called Sophia and told her in a flat, business-like tone that something had come up, and she would be attending in his place. She didn't ask what came up. She had learned not to ask those questions either. She went home, changed into the black dress she kept for exactly these occasions, elegant enough for a room full of billionaires, understated enough to avoid drawing attention she didn't want, and arrived at the Meridian Hotel at 7:45. The gala was everything those events always were, beautiful and exhausting and faintly hollow beneath the chandeliers. Sophia moved through the room the way she always did at Damian's functions, purposeful and composed. Shaking the right hands, saying the right things, representing the Moretti name with the quiet professionalism that had taken her 3 years to make look effortless. Around 9 o'clock, she found a slightly quieter corner near the far end of the ballroom and allowed herself to breathe. That was when she heard a voice behind her. "Sophia Bellini, I don't believe it." She turned. Lucas Ferraro was standing 3 feet away, holding 2 glasses of sparkling water and wearing an expression of genuine, uncomplicated delight. He was tall and lean, with the kind of easy smile that had been exactly the same since they were 12 years old, running through her grandmother's neighborhood in the Wicker Park district. He was a photographer now. A good one. He covered events and editorial work and the occasional charity function, and apparently he had been hired to document the Whitmore Gala. "Lucas," she said, and the sound that came out of her was something she hadn't heard from herself in months. A real laugh, unguarded and immediate. He handed her one of the waters and pulled her into a hug that lasted exactly as long as a hug between two people who had known each other since childhood should last. Warm and brief and entirely without complication. They spent the next hour talking. Not about Moretti Industries. Not about billion-dollar negotiations or threat assessments or the carefully managed language of corporate diplomacy. They talked about her grandmother's cooking and his younger sister's new baby and a movie they had both seen separately and loved for completely different reasons. They talked like two people who had known each other before the world had gotten heavy. At some point, she wasn't even sure exactly when Lucas had his camera around his neck and his arm loosely draped over her shoulder while he leaned in to tell her something that made her laugh hard enough that she had to press her hand to her mouth. One of the other photographers caught the moment. A clean, candid shot. Lucas beside her, his arm around her shoulder, both of them mid-laugh in the golden light of the ballroom. It was posted to the Whitmore Foundation's social media account within the hour, tagged to the official coverage of the event. Professional documentation of a charity gala. Sophia didn't even know it had been taken until the next morning. She found out because of a phone call. It came at 7:12 in the morning, while she was still in her apartment 20 minutes before she planned to leave for the office. She saw Damien's private line on her screen and answered immediately, because she always answered immediately when it was his private line. Protocol. Reflex. 3 years of conditioning. "Good morning," she said. Silence. Not a brief pause. Not the kind of quiet that happens when someone is gathering their thoughts. A silence that had weight to it. Damien. His voice, when it came, was controlled in the way that things are controlled when enormous force is being applied to keep them that way. "Delete it now." Sophia stopped moving. "I'm sorry." "The photograph. Remove it." She had been pouring coffee. She set the mug down on the counter with a small, careful click. "What photograph?" "The one posted last night from the Whitmore event." She pulled her phone away from her ear and switched to her browser, searching the Whitmore Foundation's social media. The photo loaded in seconds. Lucas beside her, his arm around her shoulder, both of them laughing. She looked at it for a moment. It was a completely ordinary photograph. The kind of image that appeared on event coverage every single day. Two people sharing a moment at a charity gala. There was nothing remotely inappropriate about it. There was nothing remotely complicated about it. She brought the phone back to her ear. "That's not my photo to delete," she said, keeping her voice level. "It was posted by the Whitmore Foundation's account. I don't have access to their social media." Another silence. "Then contact them and have it removed." Sophia felt something she didn't often feel in conversations with Damien Moretti. Genuine confusion. "Why?" The word came out before she had finished deciding whether to say it. And once it was out, she didn't take it back. She stood in her kitchen with her coffee getting cold and waited for an answer. What she got instead was a third silence. This one different from the others. This one had something underneath it that she couldn't immediately identify. Who is he? The question was so quiet it almost didn't carry. Sophia went very still. In 3 years, Damien Moretti had never asked her a single question about her personal life. Not one. He knew she had a sister in Milwaukee because it had appeared in her emergency contact paperwork, and he had never referenced it once. He knew she preferred tea to coffee because he had observed it for 18 months before quietly instructing his office manager to ensure the right supplies were stocked in the executive kitchen. He knew she was precise and methodical and capable of managing crisis situations with a steadiness that most people twice her age hadn't developed. He did not ask about the men in her life. He had never asked about the men in her life. Until this moment, standing on his private line at 7:12 in the morning, asking who the man in a photograph was, in a voice that was far too controlled to be casual. Sophia sat down slowly on the arm of her couch. "His name is Lucas Ferraro," she said carefully. "He's a photographer. He was covering the gala last night. We've known each other since we were children." Silence. "He's a childhood friend," she added. More silence. "Damien?" She said his name the way she only said it when she needed him to actually hear her, not just process what she was saying. "Why does it matter?" He didn't answer. He ended the call. Sophia stared at her phone for a long moment, then set it down on the cushion beside her. She sat there for 4 minutes without moving. Then she picked up her bag, her cold coffee and her keys, and she went to work. She arrived at Moretti Industries' Chicago headquarters at 8:47, which was 3 minutes earlier than usual. The building's lobby was all black marble and ambient light designed to communicate exactly the kind of understated power that Damien Moretti preferred. The security team nodded as she passed. The elevator to the executive floor opened before she pressed the button because the system recognized her keycard. Everything was exactly as it was every other morning, except for the fact that her boss had just asked her to delete a photograph of herself laughing with a childhood friend, and then hung up the phone when she asked him why. She set her things down at her desk, opened her computer, and began working through the morning's schedule. There was a board meeting at 10, a call with the company's overseas legal team at 1, a site visit in the afternoon for the new downtown development project. She began preparing the materials, printing summaries, arranging the relevant documents in the order Damien preferred them. At 9:17, his office door opened. Damien Moretti walked out and Sophia looked up. He was in his standard Monday attire. Dark suit, perfectly fitted, white shirt, no tie. He looked exactly as he always looked, which was to say that he looked like someone who had never once in his adult life been uncertain about anything. Except that his jaw was set in a way that she recognized, not from board meetings, not from negotiations, from the rare moments when he was working very hard to appear the way he always appeared. He walked to his assistant's station, her station, and set down a folder without looking directly at her. "The Kavanaugh account," he said. "The updated contracts need to be reviewed before the 10 o'clock. "Already pulled them," Sophia said. He glanced at her. She met his eyes steadily. "Good," he said. He turned to go back to his office. "Damien." He stopped. His back was still to her. "I'm not going to ask them to take the photo down," she said. A pause. "It's a professional event photo from a charity gala that your company sponsored. Asking for its removal would raise questions and draw exactly the kind of attention you prefer to avoid." She kept her voice completely neutral, practical, professional. "And beyond that, I don't have a reason to." He turned around slowly. There was something in his expression that she couldn't fully read, which was unusual. In 3 years of working beside him, she had learned to read Damien Moretti fairly well. She knew the difference between his thinking quietly face and his genuinely displeased face. She knew when the stillness in his posture meant he was bored, and when it meant he was paying very close attention. Right now, she couldn't categorize what she was seeing. "You're right," he said at last, and then he went back into his office. Sophia looked at the closed door for exactly 3 seconds. Then she went back to preparing for the 10 o'clock. But something had shifted. She could feel it the way you feel a change in air pressure before a storm, not visible, not dramatic, just undeniably present. Something that had been one thing yesterday was slightly different today, and the difference mattered even if she couldn't precisely define it yet. The board meeting ran 90 minutes, and Damien was exactly as he always was in those rooms. Authoritative, incisive. He read people and situations with a speed that still occasionally surprised her, cutting through performance to find the actual substance of whatever was being presented. The board respected him. Some of them were afraid of him. None of them were indifferent to him. She watched him from her chair at the end of the table where she sat to take notes, and she kept noticing something she hadn't noticed before. Or rather, she kept noticing something she had always noticed, but had trained herself to file away. Every time he made a point, his eyes moved to her. Not conspicuously, not in a way that anyone else in the room would catch. Just a brief flicker, as if checking her response before he registered the room's response. As if her reaction mattered more than theirs. She had seen him do this before. She had always told herself it was professional. That he valued her judgment and was instinctively gauging her read on the room. She was no longer entirely certain that was the complete explanation. After the meeting, she was passing through the executive corridor when Marcus Webb, Damien's head of security, fell into step beside her. Marcus was in his late 40s, built like someone who had been in serious physical danger enough times to have his body remember it, and he had always treated Sophia with a kind of matter-of-fact directness she appreciated. "Interesting morning," he said, not looking at her. "Every morning is interesting," Sophia said. "He pulled the footage from the Whitmore event last night." Sophia slowed her pace slightly. He did what? Security footage from the hotel. Marcus kept his voice low and even. He asked for a copy of the event recordings at 6:45 this morning, before he called you. She absorbed this. Damien had watched security footage from the gala, before he called her, before he told her to delete the photograph. He had watched the recording before he knew anything about Lucas Ferraro, except what he had seen in a single photograph at a charity event. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. Marcus glanced at her sideways. "Because in 8 years of working for that man, I have never once seen him pull security footage from a charity event." A pause. "And because you're smart enough to know what that means, and I figured you deserve to know it." He peeled off down a side corridor without another word. Sophia stood still for a moment in the middle of the hallway. Then she continued to her desk, sat down, and stared at her computer screen without seeing it for approximately 45 seconds. What it meant. She knew what it meant. She had known if she was being honest with herself from the moment he said, "Who is he?" in that voice. Not angry exactly, but clenched like someone holding something shut with both hands. Damien Moretti had seen a photograph of her with another man and had been awake before dawn pulling security footage. That was not professional concern. That was not a boss protecting his company's image. She had spent 3 years carefully, deliberately not thinking certain thoughts about Damien Moretti. The thoughts were becoming significantly harder to avoid. She was still sitting there when her phone buzzed. A text from Lucas. "Hey, someone sent me the gala photo. You look great. Your boss's company is all over the event coverage. Should be good publicity." "Yeah," she typed back. "Yes. Good coverage. Thanks for last night. It was really good to see you." She set the phone down. Then she picked it up again and looked at the photograph. Lucas's arm around her shoulder, both of them laughing. She looked at it with new eyes, trying to see what Damien had seen at whatever hour he had been sitting somewhere looking at his phone. She thought she understood. Not the logic of it. The logic was thin, almost non-existent. One photograph, an arm around a shoulder. Laughter. There was nothing there that any reasonable person would interpret as a reason to demand deletion. But logic wasn't what had driven that phone call. She had spent 3 years in professional proximity to one of the most controlled men she had ever encountered. A man who made decisions with surgical precision and showed emotion, the way certain old buildings showed structural cracks barely, and only under serious pressure. Last night, that photograph had found a crack. At 1:15, she was organizing the materials for the overseas legal call when Damien appeared in the doorway of his office. "Sophia," she looked up. "Come in." She gathered her notepad and followed him inside, closing the door behind her. His office was massive floor-to-ceiling glass on 2 walls, a desk that could serve as a conference table, books on shelves that she had noticed over 3 years he actually read. He stood with his back to her for a moment, looking out at the Chicago skyline. Then he turned. "I was out of line this morning," he said. She waited. "The call." He paused. "What I asked?" "Yes," she said. "You were." Something moved across his face. Not offense. She had expected the possibility of offense, and she was prepared for it. What she saw instead was something closer to relief, as if he had expected worse from her and was recalibrating. "You're right that the photo presents no problem for the company," he said. "I know. The request was inappropriate." It was. He was quiet for a moment. This was the kind of quiet she was more familiar with, the one where he was deciding something, working through information, arriving at a conclusion methodically. "Who is Lucas Ferraro?" he asked. And there it was again. Not command this time. Question. A real one. Sophia looked at him carefully. "He's someone I've known since I was 12, she said. "His family and mine were neighbors in Wicker Park. He photographs charity events and editorial work. He has a younger sister named Anna, who just had her first baby. He is not my boyfriend. He has never been my boyfriend, and the photograph was taken by another photographer at the event without either of us being aware of it." Damien listened to all of this without moving. "Is there a reason," Sophia said quietly, "that you needed to know that?" A long pause. "No," he said, but his eyes said something completely different. She held his gaze for 3 more seconds. Then she looked down at her notepad. "The legal call is at 1, she said, her voice returning fully to its professional register. "The Soul team needs the updated compliance documents before they can proceed. I'll have them ready." "Good." She stood to go. "Sophia." She stopped. "I'm sorry," he said, "for this morning." She looked back at him over her shoulder. In 3 years, Damien Moretti had apologized to her exactly twice. Once, when he had missed an important presentation because of something that had nothing to do with her and had made her scramble to cover it. Once when a security decision he had made had inadvertently complicated her work for 2 days. This was different from both of those apologies. This one cost him something. She could see it in the way he held himself, that very slight tightening across the shoulders, the particular stillness that meant he was doing something difficult. "I know," she said. And she walked back to her desk. The afternoon passed with a specific charged kind of normalcy. Everything was exactly what it should be on the surface. The legal call happened. The documents went through. She coordinated the site visit and handled 3 separate crises involving vendors' schedules and 1 very aggravated city permit officer. Damien moved through the afternoon the way he always did, which was to say with complete command and focus. But twice passing her desk, he paused. Not to say anything, not to ask about work. Just paused almost involuntarily, as if some gravitational pull was making the direct route past her desk slightly curved. Both times he caught himself and kept moving. She noticed. She noticed and said nothing and went back to whatever she was doing. At 5:40, most of the floor had emptied. Sophia was finishing the last of her scheduling tasks when she heard his footsteps and looked up to find him standing at the edge of her desk. His jacket was over his arm. His workday was done. "Are you taking anything home?" he asked, which was something he asked when he was in the habit of walking out at the same time as her and occasionally carrying files if she was loaded down with materials. It was a small practical thing he had started doing maybe 18 months ago without either of them ever explicitly acknowledging it. "Just my bag," she said. He nodded. She finished shutting down her computer and gathered her things, and they walked to the elevator together. This happened most nights, not every night, but most, and it had never felt unusual before. Tonight it felt like something was stretching in the silence between them, pulling at a tension she didn't know how to name. They reached the elevator. The doors opened. They stepped in. "Your friend," Damien said as the doors closed. "Ferraro. He'll be at the next Whitmore event." She glanced at him. "Probably. They use him regularly for their events." He nodded slowly. "Is that a problem?" she asked. "No," he said. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. He held them for her, which he always did, a reflex of formality that she had long stopped registering. Tonight she registered it. They crossed the lobby and stepped out onto the street. Chicago in the early evening, the sound and temperature and movement of a city settling toward night. "Good night, Sophia," Damien said. "Good night," she answered. She watched him walk toward the SUV waiting at the curb, and she thought about 3 things simultaneously. The call this morning. His voice. The weight of that single question, who is he? The way his eyes had moved to her in the boardroom, checking her response before anyone else's. The apology in his office and what it had cost him. She thought about 3 years of working beside the most controlled man she had ever encountered, and a photograph and a phone call at 7 in the morning, and Marcus Webb telling her in a quiet corridor that Damien had pulled security footage before the sun was fully up. She stood on the sidewalk until his car was out of sight. Then she started walking. She had told herself for 3 years that there was only one possible explanation for whatever existed between her and Damien Moretti. Professional respect. Mutual trust earned and tested over time. The specific kind of closeness that develops between 2 people who work intensely together and understand each other's minds. She was less certain of that explanation than she had ever been, and she suspected that after this morning, Damien was less certain of it too. She turned the corner toward the train station, and somewhere behind her, the city went on doing what cities do, loud and complicated and indifferent to the small monumental shifts that happen between two people, in an elevator, in an office doorway, in the weighted silence of a phone call at dawn. The shift had happened. Neither of them had named it yet. But Sophia Bellini was not the kind of woman who left important things unnamed for long. By the time she reached the platform and heard the train coming, she had already decided. Tomorrow, she was going to ask him directly. And she was going to make him answer. Sophia had made the decision on the train platform the night before, standing in the noise and the cold air, with the certainty sitting inside her chest, like something solid. She was going to ask him directly, and she was going to make him answer. She arrived at the office the next morning at 8:32, which was earlier than usual by 15 minutes. Not because she was nervous, she refused to call it nervousness. Because she was precise about timing, and this particular conversation required her to already be settled and composed before Damien walked through the executive floor door at 8:50. She had her coffee. She had her materials for the day. She had the controlled, professional expression she wore the way other people wore armor. She was ready. Damien arrived at 8:48. He walked in the way he always walked in. Not hurried, not slow-moving, with the kind of absolute physical certainty that came from being a man who had never in his adult life walked into a room he wasn't prepared to own. His suit was charcoal today. His expression was exactly what it always was before he had reviewed the morning's briefing, neutral, contained, focused on the internal architecture of whatever the day was going to require. He glanced at her as he passed her desk. She met his eyes. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," he said. He went into his office and closed the door. Sophia looked at the closed door for exactly 2 seconds. Then she gathered the morning briefing folder, stood up, walked to his office, knocked once, and opened the door before he had time to respond. He was already behind his desk opening his laptop. He looked up at her entrance, not surprised, because Damien Moretti was almost never surprised, but something in his posture shifted slightly, a fractional adjustment that she had learned to read as attention fully engaged. "I need 5 minutes," she said, "that aren't about the schedule." A pause. "Close the door," he said. She closed it behind her and sat down in the chair across from his desk, the one she used for working meetings, not because she needed to be seated, but because standing felt theatrical and she wasn't interested in theater. She set the briefing folder on her knee and looked at him directly. "Yesterday morning," she said, "you called me at 7:12 and told me to delete a photograph." He held her gaze. "I know what I did." "You then asked me who the man in the photograph was." "I know that too." "And then you apologized." She paused. "Which is 3 things that have never happened before in 3 years. Not in that order, not in that combination, and not in that tone." Damien was quiet. "I'm not going to pretend I don't notice things," Sophia said. "You know I notice things. That's part of why this works." She meant the job, the professional relationship, the specific ecosystem of trust they had built. She watched him understand that she meant all of it. "So I need you to tell me what's actually happening, because the alternative is that we both sit here and pretend everything is exactly what it's always been, and I don't think either of us can do that convincingly anymore." The silence stretched. He was looking at her the way he looked at complex problems, not with discomfort, but with the particular intensity of someone measuring exactly what a situation actually was versus what it appeared to be. Then he leaned back in his chair just slightly and said, "What do you think is happening?" "I asked first," she said. His mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but the shadow of one, and it happened quickly. "You did." Another pause. "I reacted," he said at last, choosing the word carefully, inappropriately. "To a photograph?" "Yes." "Why?" He looked at her for a long moment. The kind of look that had weight and direction that landed somewhere specific. "You know why." "I want you to say it." "Sophia." "Damien." She said it exactly the way she had said it the morning before on the phone. Not a challenge, not a demand, something quieter and more serious than either. 3 years. I have worked beside you for 3 years, and I have managed a great deal of things I wasn't asked to manage, and I have been professional and competent and discreet about all of it. I am asking you one direct question, and I am asking you to give me one direct answer. He said nothing for a moment. Then, I saw the photograph and I didn't like it. Why? Because it was him and not me, he said, and it came out flat and factual and completely without decoration, the way things sound when someone has stopped bothering to construct anything around the truth. The words landed in the room and stayed there. Sophia looked at him. He looked back at her, and his jaw was set, and his posture was still completely controlled, and his eyes were doing the thing they almost never did. They were fully unguarded. Just for that moment in that office with the door closed, and no one else in the room. Damien Moretti looked like a man who had just said something he couldn't take back and wasn't sure he wanted to. "Okay," Sophia said. "Okay," he repeated, flat, slightly careful. "That's honest," she said. "I didn't know you could do that." Something shifted in his face. "That's not a fair thing to say. It might not be fair. It's true." He stood up, which meant he needed to move, which meant she had cracked something, and he was trying to recalibrate without showing it. He walked to the window, not hurrying, and stood with his back to her and the city spread out below them. "It changes things," he said. "If I say it." "It already changed things," Sophia said. "When you called me at 7 in the morning to tell me to delete a photograph of myself at a charity event. That changed things. I'm just trying to understand what they changed into." He was quiet for a long moment. "My world is not safe," he said. "You know that." "I've always known that. Knowing it abstractly and having it actually affect you are different things." "I'm aware." He turned around. "The people who want to reach me, the ones I haven't been able to neutralize yet, they look for leverage. They look for what matters to someone. They find it and they use it." A pause. "You understand what I'm telling you? You're telling me that the reason you've kept a professional distance isn't because you don't—" She stopped, started again. "You're saying it's protective." "Partially." "Partially," she repeated. "The other part," he said, and then paused for so long she thought he was going to stop there. "The other part is that you are the best professional relationship I have ever had. You are the most capable person on my staff. You handle situations that would break other people, and you do it without losing yourself, and I—" Another pause. "I didn't want to make it complicated." "By complicated, you mean by admitting that you have feelings." He said nothing. "Damien." "Yes," he said. "By admitting that." Sophia let out a breath. Not relief exactly. Something more like the release of pressure that had been building for a long time under something she had kept deliberately sealed. "Okay," she said again. "You keep saying that." "Because I keep meaning it." She stood up. "You should know something about Lucas." He waited. "We were 12 when we met. His parents and my grandmother were close. He is one of 4 people in my life that I would trust without conditions, and what we have is completely entirely without complication. He is my friend. That photograph is what it looks like 2 people who grew up together having a good evening." Damien absorbed this. "I know," he said. "You know now. Last night you didn't." "No. And rather than asking me, you pulled security footage from the hotel at 6:45 in the morning." He went very still. Sophia watched his face carefully. "Marcus told me," she said. "Not maliciously. I think he was trying to make sure I understood what I was looking at." Damien was quiet for a moment, and something moved through his expression that she couldn't quite name. Not embarrassment exactly. She wasn't sure Damien Moretti experienced embarrassment in the conventional sense. Something closer to being seen doing something he hadn't decided to reveal. "I see," he said. "You do that," Sophia said. "When something concerns you, you gather information before you ask the person involved. You go around them instead of to them." It's efficient, he said. It's avoidant, she said. He looked at her sharply. I know, she said. No one has ever said that to you before. You can add it to the list of things only I tell you. Something happened in his expression then. It wasn't quite a smile. It was something warmer and more complicated than that, something that settled into the lines around his eyes and stayed there, and Sophia felt it move through her chest, the way things do when they recognize something they've been waiting for without knowing they were waiting. What do we do with this? He said. We don't do anything with it today, she said. You have a board meeting at 10, and I have 14 things that need handling before lunch. She moved toward the door. But we stopped pretending the last 3 years were purely professional, and we stopped making decisions based on what might or might not be appropriate, and we start being honest. She had her hand on the door handle. Sophia. She stopped. Thank you, he said, for coming in here. She looked back at him. You would have waited another 3 years. Probably, he said. I know. She opened the door. That's why I didn't. She walked back to her desk, sat down, and began working through the morning's tasks. And for the first time in 3 years, she didn't file the awareness of him away into the sealed compartment. She let it exist in the same space as everything else, and found somewhat to her surprise that the sky didn't fall. The next 2 weeks moved differently, not dramatically, not in ways that were visible to the rest of the staff or that altered the professional structure they had built. They still moved through the workday with the same efficiency and precision. She still managed his schedule, still handled his negotiations, still occupied the role she had always occupied. But the quality of the silence between them changed. He started asking her things he hadn't asked before. Not work things he had always asked work things. Small things, personal things delivered in the matter-of-fact tone he used for everything, as if he was simply gathering data. But the data he was gathering now was, what did she do on Sunday? Had she spoken to her sister lately? Was she eating actual meals or the granola bars she kept in her desk drawer when the afternoon ran long? That's the 3rd time you've eaten at your desk in 5 days, he said one afternoon, appearing at the edge of her workspace, with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled up, which was his end-of-day look. It's been a 5-day week, she said without looking up. Go home. I have 3 more things. They can wait until tomorrow. They can't. Then I'll help you finish them. She did look up then. You'll help me. I have read every document in this company, he said mildly. I think I can assist with filing. She stared at him. He pulled up the chair from the adjacent empty desk, sat down across from her, and said, What are the 3 things? She told him. They finished in 40 minutes, which would have taken her an hour 20 alone. And when they were done, he gathered his jacket and she gathered her bag, and they walked out together. And in the elevator, he stood slightly closer than he usually did. Not touching, just closer. And neither of them mentioned it. That was how it went. In increments. Small, deliberate, unspoken increments. And then the Thursday of the 3rd week arrived, and with it, a problem that changed everything. It started with a phone call that came to Sophia's direct line at 2 in the afternoon. Not Damien's line, hers. She answered. The voice on the other end was male, smooth, and entirely too comfortable. Miss Bellini, this is Robert Vance. I'm calling on behalf of a client who has been following your impressive career with considerable interest. Sophia clicked her pen closed. I'm Damien Moretti's executive assistant. If you have business with Moretti Industries, you should call the main. This isn't about Moretti Industries, Vance said. This is about you. My client would like to offer you a position. Senior Director of Operations. Compensation beginning at $320,000 annually with equity participation and a signing bonus. A deliberate pause. Considerably more than your current arrangement, I would imagine. Sophia was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Who is your client? She asked. The offer will come from Salvatore Holdings. I believe you're familiar with the name. She was. Victor Salvatore. She had heard that name in Damien's office. In conversations she was meant to hear, and conversations she was not meant to hear. In the specific tone that Damien used when he was discussing something that required his full attention, and then some. Victor Salvatore was Damien Moretti's most significant rival. Had been for 5 years. He operated in the same territory, the same circles, the same shadow world, where money and influence and things that didn't appear in public filings all intersected. He was wealthy, he was connected, and he had been trying by various means to find a crack in Damien Moretti's operation for as long as anyone could remember. He had not until this moment ever called Sophia's direct line. "I'm not interested," she said. Her voice was perfectly level. "Please remove my name from your client's list." She ended the call. She sat for a moment with her hand still on the phone. Then she stood up, walked to Damien's office, and knocked. "Come in." She opened the door. He was on a call himself, his phone to his ear, one hand braced against the edge of his desk. He looked up when she entered and immediately registered something in her expression because she saw his posture change, the subtle shift of a man who has gone from distracted to fully alert in the space of a single second. He said into the phone, "I'll call you back," and hung up without waiting for an answer. "What happened?" he said. She told him. She gave him the full account without editorializing, exactly as she had been trained to report information, complete, precise, chronological. The name Vance, the offer, the figure, the company. When she finished, Damien was standing very still. "He called your direct line," he said. "Yes." "Not the company's main number?" "No." He turned away from her toward the window, and she watched the muscles across his shoulders go tight. It was a brief thing. He contained it almost immediately, but she had seen it. "How long have you had your direct line?" he said. "Since I started. You know that." "That number is not in any public directory," he said. "It is not on the company website. It appears in internal documentation only." She understood what he was saying. He shouldn't have it. "No," Damien said. He shouldn't. The silence that followed was a different kind of silence than any they had shared in the previous weeks. This one was operational. She could see him moving through it, calculating, building the architecture of what this meant and what it indicated. "He's testing something," Damien said almost to himself. "This isn't a genuine offer." "I know. He wants to see how you respond, whether you tell me, whether there's a friction point between us that he can use." He paused. "Or he already knows there is." Sophia looked at him carefully. "What does that mean?" He turned around. His expression was controlled, but barely in the way a fist is controlled, contained force. "It means that Victor Salvatore does not do anything without a reason. He doesn't spend resources on offers he expects to be declined. He either believes you might actually leave, which requires him to have information about your current situation, or—" He stopped. "Or what?" "Or he's already decided that you are a significant variable," Damien said quietly. "And he wants to understand how to use you." The word landed cold. "Use me," she said. "As leverage," Damien said. "Against me." He met her eyes. "He would not be wrong that you matter." It was the most direct thing he had said to her since the morning she had walked into his office and made him answer her question. The air in the room felt different, charged in a way that had nothing to do with whatever was developing between them and everything to do with the specific serious danger of what Victor Salvatore already knew or suspected. "I need to contact my security team," Damien said, moving to his desk. "Do that," she said. "But Damien—" She waited until he looked at her. "This doesn't change anything, on my end." He held her gaze. "You don't know yet what it might mean." "I know enough." "Sophia." "I know enough," she said again steadily. "Do what you need to do." She went back to her desk. Over the next 3 days, she became aware of small changes. A second security credential required for her building access. A new protocol for her direct phone line that routed calls through a verification system. Marcus appearing more frequently in her peripheral vision without seeming to appear on purpose. Small practical adjustments made quietly and without announcement. She didn't protest them. She understood what they were. On the fourth day after Vance's call, she was working through the morning's emails when she found something that made her stop completely. It was a link, forwarded from her personal email to her work account, which was strange because she didn't typically forward between them. The source address was unfamiliar. The link led to a message board post, and the message board post contained a story about her. Not a true story. A narrative. A carefully constructed, plausible-sounding narrative that described Sofia Bellini's role at Moretti Industries not in terms of her actual professional function, but in terms of something else entirely. The story implied, without stating it directly, that her position in Damien's organization was the result of a personal relationship, that her salary and her access and her professional accomplishments were not earned, that she was, in the clinical language of the post, the kind of hire that raises questions about company governance and professional ethics. It had been shared 600 times. She read it twice. Slowly, carefully, the way she read every important document. Then she forwarded it to Damien's private email with a single line, "You should see this." Within 4 minutes, he was standing at her desk. He had his phone in his hand, and he had clearly read it on the way out of his office, and the expression on his face was one she had not seen before. Not anger, she knew his anger, which was cold and controlled. This was something different, something that lived beneath the control. "How long has this been up?" he said. "Based on the timestamps in the share history, approximately 14 hours. "Did you see it last night?" "No. I found it this morning in a forwarded email from an address I don't recognize." He looked up from his phone. "They sent it to you directly?" "Yes." "They wanted you to see it?" "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. "Damien," she said, "this doesn't hurt me." "Sofia, listen to me." She kept her voice even. "This is designed to hurt me, which is a different thing. The intention is to make me feel ashamed of something I didn't do, and to make you feel responsible for the damage, and to create a fracture between us. That's the mechanism." She paused. "It only works if we let it work." He looked at her for a long moment. "It's already been seen by people in our industry," he said. "I know. Business partners, people on the board. I know. They will be asking." "Let them ask," she said. "My record is my record. 3 years of work that anyone in this building can verify. You know what I've accomplished here, and so does everyone who has worked with me directly. A message board post does not change the substance of what I've done." He was still looking at her with that expression she didn't have a name for yet. "I want to take this apart publicly," he said. "I want to correct the record." "You can do that," she said, "but not immediately and not reactively. A reaction tells them they've found a nerve. A measured factual response timed correctly tells them they haven't." Something moved in his face. "You," he said, "are handling this better than I am." "I'm not the one who spent the morning looking at security footage," she said. He actually made a sound then, a brief short exhale that was the closest she had heard to a laugh from Damien Moretti in 3 years of standing next to him. "Fair," he said. They worked through the afternoon together, in the way they had developed over the preceding weeks, not side by side physically, but moving through things in coordination, him making calls, her building the documentation trail they would need for any formal response to the post. It was efficient, and it was purposeful, and it was the particular kind of partnership that had nothing performative in it. Two people who worked well together, working well together under pressure. But at 3:15, something happened that shifted the entire frame of what they were dealing with. Damien appeared at her desk again. His expression was controlled in a way that meant the opposite of controlled. "Victor Salvatore called me," he said. Sofia went still. "5 minutes ago. My private line." "What did he say?" Damien was quiet for a moment. "He told me he had made your acquaintance last week. He told me he hoped I hadn't made things uncomfortable for you by overreacting to a photograph." A pause. He used that word, overreacting. The air left the room. "He knows," Sofia said. "He's known for longer than we have," Damien said. And that was the moment everything reorganized itself. The phone call, the offer, The message board post sent directly to her email, Salvatore calling Damien's private line and referencing a photograph that had never been publicly described as anything other than charity event coverage. Victor Salvatore had been watching, not as a reaction to anything that had happened between them recently. Before. He had been watching before. He had seen the shift between them, or suspected it, or been told of it by someone inside the organization, and he had spent the past week building around it. The offer to Sophia wasn't a recruitment attempt. It was reconnaissance. The message board post wasn't designed to shame her. It was designed to make Damien feel guilty, to create the specific pressure of believing he had damaged her career simply by being close to her. And the phone call to Damien was the confirmation that he had understood the photograph for exactly what it was, and had built a strategy around it, and was now letting Damien know that he had done so. Victor Salvatore was telling Damien Moretti that he had found his weakness, and his weakness was standing at the desk outside his office. Damien looked at her. Sophia looked back at him. "He wants you afraid," she said quietly. "He wants you to make decisions from a place of fear. He wants you to pull me out of this building, or change my role, or create enough distance between us that the people watching from outside see it as confirmation of what the post implied." Damien said nothing. "He wants you to react," she said, "the same way you reacted to a photograph." That landed. She saw it land, saw the slight flinch that wasn't quite a flinch, the recognition that moved through his face and settled into something harder. "You're right," he said. "What I need," she said carefully, "is for you to trust me, not manage me, not protect me by making decisions about my life without asking me. Trust me. Tell me what you know, and let me decide what I'm willing to stand in." Damien looked at her for a long, quiet moment. "What if what you're willing to stand in is more than is safe?" he said. "Then we figure that out together," she said. "That's how this works." He held her gaze. "This isn't how I operate," he said. "I know," she said. "Start." Something shifted in him then. She watched it happen in real time. Not a collapse, not a softening, but a recalibration. Something that had been braced against something else easing back a fraction, making room. "Victor Salvatore has been operating in Chicago for 11 years, Damien said. In that time, he has positioned himself to take over 3 major operations by finding pressure points in the people who ran them. Not through force, through information, through leverage applied at exactly the right moment to exactly the right weak point. And you've never given him a weak point," Sophia said. No, she understood. She had understood from the moment Damien said, "He wanted to know what matters to someone." She understood it in her bones the way you understand things that are about you, even when they're stated in the abstract. "Then we don't give him one now," she said. "It may be too late," Damien said quietly. "He already knows." "He suspects," she said. "Knowing and suspecting are different. Suspicion is only useful to him if it's confirmed. If we go on exactly as we have been professionally, precisely without giving him anything that looks like a fracture or a retreat, his suspicion stays exactly what it is. A theory." Damien was quiet. "Can you do that?" she asked. He looked at her, directly the way he had looked at her in his office that first morning, after the photograph stripped of the usual careful management of what he revealed. "Can I continue working beside you every day, knowing what I know, and act as if none of it matters?" he said. "Yes," she said, "because the work matters, and because neither of us is the kind of person who lets someone else dictate what we do." He was quiet for a moment longer. "All right," he said. "All right," she agreed. They went back to work, but something had permanently changed in the structure of what existed between them, and both of them knew it. And for once, they didn't file it away or seal it behind professionalism or pretend it wasn't there. They let it exist. They worked beside each other in the long afternoon of that difficult day, and the work was real, and the danger was real, and the thing between them was real too, and the 3 things occupied the same space without collapsing any of the others. At 6:15, when the floor was nearly empty, and the day had done everything it intended to do to them. Damien stopped beside her desk one final time. He didn't say anything. He set a cup of tea on the corner of her desk from the executive kitchen, prepared exactly the way she preferred it, which meant he had gone and done it himself while she was finishing her last document, and he walked back to his office. She looked at the cup. She looked at his closed door. She picked up the tea, wrapped both hands around the warmth of it, and thought about Victor Salvatore watching them from somewhere outside, and thinking he had found a weakness. He had found something. Whether it was a weakness remained to be seen. The tea had been the beginning of something neither of them named. Not a declaration, not a gesture designed to be interpreted. Just a cup of tea set quietly on the corner of her desk, prepared exactly the way she preferred by a man who had apparently been paying close enough attention for long enough to know what exactly that meant. The temperature, the steeping time, the absence of anything sweetened. Sophia had thought about it on the train home. She had thought about it again in the morning. Not obsessively, not in the way that derails a person. Practically. The way she thought about everything that needed to be understood and filed correctly. What it told her was simple. He had been watching her for a long time. Not in the way Victor Salvatore was watching, with calculation and with the intent to use what he saw. In the other way. The way that accumulates quietly over years and reveals itself only under pressure or in small, unguarded moments, or when someone stops fighting the gravity of a thing and simply lets it pull. She understood the distinction. She was still thinking about it when she walked onto the executive floor the next morning and found Marcus Webb standing outside Damien's office door in a posture that told her immediately that something had happened. Marcus didn't stand outside the office door. He operated from a floor below from the security center and appeared on this floor when summoned or when something required his presence. His standing outside Damien's closed door at 8:54 in the morning was not a scheduled occurrence. She crossed the floor to him directly. "What happened?" she said. "Morning, Miss Bellini." His voice was even, which was how Marcus's voice always was, but his eyes were doing the thing they did when he was processing a serious situation. "He's been in there since 7. He asked me to come up at 8:30. "Is he all right?" "Physically, yes." A pause that had precision in it. "He received something overnight." "What kind of something?" "He'll tell you," Marcus said. "He was waiting for you." She knocked once and opened the door. Damien was at his desk. He had clearly been there for hours. His jacket was off. His sleeves were rolled up, and there were several printouts spread across the surface in front of him, in the specific disorder that meant he had been working through them rapidly, moving things around, trying to see a pattern from multiple angles. He looked up when she entered. "Close the door," he said. She closed it. She didn't sit. She looked at the printouts on the desk and felt the particular quality of his silence, not the weighted quiet of an emotional conversation, but something faster, something that had urgency in it. "Talk to me," she said. He turned one of the printouts to face her across the desk. She leaned forward and looked at it. It was a financial document, or the appearance of a financial document. She recognized the formatting, the column structure, the account numbers that appeared in a style she knew well from 3 years of managing Moretti Industries paperwork. But the amounts were wrong. The dates were wrong. The transactions described were transactions she had never processed, never seen, never had any reason to know about, and her initials were at the bottom of every one. She looked at the papers for a long moment. Then she straightened up and looked at Damien. "These were delivered to the board's private inbox last night," he said. "All 6 members received them simultaneously at 11:47. An anonymous sender. The documents are formatted to look like internal financial transfers authorized at the executive assistant level." He paused. "Your level." "The accounts described don't exist," she said. "I know. The transactions didn't happen. I know that too. But they look real," she said. "They look," Damien said carefully, "exactly real enough to warrant an investigation, which is the point." Sophia pulled the closest printout toward her and looked at it again. She was precise by nature and professional training, and what she was looking at was precise, in exactly the same way built by someone who understood how these documents were supposed to look. who had studied the internal formatting of Moretti Industries' financial infrastructure carefully enough to replicate its architecture with near-perfect accuracy. "Victor," she said. "His fingerprints are not on it," Damien said. "Nothing traceable. The sender address is a ghost. The documents were assembled from publicly available information about the company's structure, combined with specifics that could only have come from inside." She heard what he wasn't quite saying. "You think he has a source inside the company?" "I think it's possible." "How long have you thought that—" "Since the phone call to your direct line," he said. "That number is internal only. It was the first indication that someone with inside access has been feeding him information." Sophia sat down. Not from weakness, from the practical recognition that this was a conversation that required stillness, not the standing posture of someone managing a crisis from a distance. She sat down and put both hands flat on the desk and looked at Damien directly. "The board received these last night," she said. "Yes." "What was their response?" "Two of them called me before 7 this morning," he said. "Daniel Reeves and Margaret Calloway. They were measured. They didn't accuse anything. They said they felt obligated to flag it and asked for my response by end of day." "And the other 4? "Haven't called yet," he said, "which is either because they're waiting for guidance from Reeves or because they believe what they're looking at." "What did you tell Reeves?" "That the documents were fabricated," he said. "That I would provide full documentation of the actual account records by noon." "Good," she was already thinking. "Pull the real transaction logs for the periods referenced. I'll cross-reference every account number in those printouts against our actual records and show you exactly where the discrepancies are. We can have a complete forensic comparison ready by 10. Damien looked at her. "Sophia, I know what you're going to say," she said. "You don't. You're going to say that this is more serious than a message board post, which is true. You're going to say that Victor has escalated to direct financial fraud allegations, which is also true. And then you're going to say something about whether I should be involved in the response given that my name is on the fabricated documents." She met his eyes. "Am I close?" A pause. "Very." "The answer to the last part is yes," she said. "I should be and will be involved, because the alternative is that I step back and let you manage the defense of my own reputation without me, which is exactly what Victor wants. He wants me marginalized. He wants my name attached to something that makes people question my access and my role here. The most effective counter to that is not my absence. It's my visible, documented, unambiguous presence doing exactly what I always do." Damien was quiet for a moment. "You're not wrong," he said. "I know. But I want you to understand what it means if this continues to escalate," he said. His voice was level, but there was something underneath the level tone, something she was getting better at hearing. "This is not corporate politics. Victor Salvatore plays a longer game than that, and he has resources that go significantly beyond what appears in public filings. If he has decided that you are the most effective point of pressure, then let's make sure he finds out he was wrong," she said. The silence that followed was brief and dense. "All right," Damien said. They worked through the morning with a focused, shared urgency that Sophia found somewhat to her own surprise, clarifying rather than frightening. The fear was there, she wasn't built to not feel it, and she was honest enough with herself to acknowledge its presence. But it sat underneath the work, not on top of it. She moved through the actual transaction records with the systematic precision that was one of her genuine professional strengths, flagging every discrepancy, building the documentation trail that would make the fabricated papers look exactly like what they were to anyone who examined them carefully. By 10:45, she had a complete comparative analysis. By 11, Damien had reviewed it and confirmed it. By 11:30, it was in Daniel Reeves's hands with a cover letter that was exact, professional, and factually devastating to the documents Victor had sent. Reeves called back at noon. Sophia listened from her desk as Damien took the call in his office with the door partially open. She heard Damien's responses measured, brief, unequivocal. She heard the tone of the exchange shift as Reeves worked through the comparative analysis. And then she heard Reeves say, in a voice that had lost most of its measured caution, "This is a targeted attack. Someone is actively trying to damage this company." "Yes," Damien said, "and it will not succeed." She heard Reeves ask something she couldn't catch. And then she heard Damien say very clearly, "Miss Bellini's integrity is not in question. I have worked with her for 3 years, and I will stake the company's standing on that." She stopped typing. She looked at the partially open door. She started typing again. The afternoon brought 2 more developments. The first was an email from Margaret Calloway to Damien copied to the full board, stating that after reviewing the analysis provided, she was satisfied the documents were fabricated and moved to formally log that position in the board's correspondence. 3 other board members replied within the hour to agree. The fourth, a man named Gordon Price, who had been on the board for 14 months and whom Sophia had always found slightly too interested in. Damien's operational details replied only to say he would review the matter further before commenting. She noted this. She noted it precisely and specifically, and she did not mention it yet to Damien because she was not certain enough yet to say what she thought it meant. The second development came at 3:40 in the afternoon. Her phone rang. Her personal cell, not the work line. She looked at the screen and didn't recognize the number. She almost let it go. Then, something made her answer. "Miss Bellini." The voice was Victor Salvatore's. She knew it from a single source, an audio clip from a public deposition she had found and listened to 18 months ago, when she had quietly begun building her own understanding of the landscape around Damien's world. The voice was precisely as she had heard it, smooth, older, deliberate. "I was hoping we might have a more direct conversation." She felt everything in her go very still. "Mr. Salvatore," she said. Her voice was completely even. She was aware in a remote and somewhat astonished part of her mind of how even it was. "I want to apologize for the documents," he said. "Then you know they were fabricated." "I know they were unfortunate," he said. "Something of a miscalculation by someone working on my behalf. That's not the approach I would have chosen." "What approach would you have chosen?" A small pause. "Something more honest, I think. Something like this." Another pause. "Miss Bellini, you are one of the most capable professionals I have encountered in 30 years of operating in this industry. I mean that without any ulterior purpose. Your analytical ability, your professional judgment, your composure under circumstances like today's, these are exceptional qualities." "Thank you," she said. "Now say the part with the actual purpose." He made a sound that might have been admiration, or might have been calculation wearing the clothes of admiration. "Damien Moretti is a difficult man to work for." "He's not difficult," she said. "He's dangerous," Salvatore said, "which is a different kind of difficult. I'm aware of my professional environment." "Are you aware," Salvatore said carefully, "of what you represent to him not professionally, personally?" The deliberateness of the question was a demonstration in itself. He wanted her to know that he knew. That was the entire purpose of this call. "Why are you calling me directly?" she said. "Because the approach through the board didn't serve anyone," he said. "And because I think you're smart enough to see what I'm actually telling you." "Tell me plainly," she said. "Damien cares about you," Salvatore said. "Significantly. More than he has cared about anything outside of his professional empire in a very long time. That means one of 2 things for you, Miss Bellini. It means you are the most protected person in his world. Or it means you are the most exposed one." A pause. "Right now today, from where I sit, it means the second one." Sophia said nothing. "I'm not making a threat," he said. "I want to be very clear about that. I am making an observation. His attachment to you is a vulnerability in the architecture of everything he has built, and vulnerabilities attract attention that has nothing to do with me." "And yet here you are," she said. Another sound, definitely closer to admiration this time. "I'm offering you a way to step out of the line of fire," he said. "Come to work for me. It is a genuine offer. I retract nothing about the compensation and the role. And in exchange, you are no longer a pressure point for anyone trying to reach Damian Moretti. In exchange, she said, I become a pressure point for someone trying to reach him from the inside. Complete silence. I'm not interested, she said. I wasn't interested when your representative called my work line. I'm not interested now. And the next time you contact me on any line, I will report the call to my legal counsel and to every board member who received your fabricated documents last night. A pause. I hope you have a productive afternoon, Mr. Salvatore. She ended the call. She sat very still for approximately 30 seconds. Then she stood up, walked to Damian's office, opened the door without knocking and said, Victor Salvatore just called my personal cell. Damian was on his feet before she finished the sentence. She told him the conversation in full, every word in order exactly as it had happened. She watched his face as she did, and it was the most unguarded she had seen it, not during the emotional conversations, not during the moments of honesty they had built toward slowly over weeks, but now listening to what Salvatore had said to her, the calculation beneath the courtesy, the specific and targeted precision of telling her that she was his most exposed point. When she finished, he was absolutely still. He has your personal number, he said. Yes. That is not information from inside the company, he said. Your personal cell is not in any Moretti Industries documentation. No, she said. It isn't. His expression shifted. He's been investigating you personally, Damian said. Separately from anything to do with the company. This started before we became... He stopped. Before things changed, she said. Yes. She let that land. He was watching you before the photograph, she said. Not a question. He may have identified you as significant before I did, Damian said with a flatness in his voice that she recognized as the sound of something humbling being acknowledged without drama. That means he's been building this longer than we thought, she said. Yes, which means the financial documents, the message board post, the job offer through Vance, the call just now, these aren't reactions to anything that happened between us recently. They're a prepared sequence. Rolled out in stages, Damian said. Each one designed to produce a specific response. Test the offer to see if I'll leave. Damage my reputation if I stay. Bring the board's attention to my role to create pressure on you. Call me directly to confirm that you care about what happens to me. She said it methodically, working through it the way she worked through everything. And if at any point you react from emotion rather than strategy, if you try to remove me from the company or visibly protect me in ways that confirm his theory, he gets confirmation and escalates. He gets the crack, Damian said. Yes. He looked at her for a long moment. I want to go after him, he said. Quiet and direct, which was more frightening than if he had said it loudly. I have documentation of the fabricated financial documents. I have the call records from your line and mine. I have enough to bring a case to people who are very interested in what Victor Salvatore has been doing in this city for 11 years. That's the right response, she said. It's also exactly what he's prepared for, which means we can't do it reactively. We do it when we have enough to make it irreversible. And until then, she said, we work. We go about exactly what we've been doing. We don't give him a reaction he can use. Damian was quiet. I have one condition, she said. He looked at her. You tell me everything from here, she said. Not after you've managed it, not once it's already been handled. Everything as it happens. I am not a protected party in this. I am a participant. I need to be treated like one. The conditions sat in the air between them. You understand what that means, he said carefully. In my world, knowing everything is not always safe, she said. I understand. I want it anyway. He was quiet for a moment that felt longer than it was. All right, he said. Thank you, she said. She was turning to go when he said, Sophia. She turned back. He was still standing, but something in the set of him had changed. Something he had been holding at a specific angle had shifted just slightly, the way a building shifts almost imperceptibly when the ground beneath it moves. I am going to end this, he said. Victor Salvatore picked the wrong variable to press on. She looked at him steadily. "I know," she said. "So am I." She went back to her desk. For the next week, they worked in the specific way that she had only seen Damien work when he was treating something as a serious operational problem rather than a professional inconvenience. Focused, systematic, without waste. She matched his pace and exceeded it in the areas where her own skills were strongest: the document analysis, the information architecture, the careful assembly of a case built from the inside out. They found the leak on the fourth day. It came through a discrepancy she noticed in the access logs for the company's internal financial system. Someone with legitimate credentials had pulled account formatting data, not the accounts themselves, not actual transaction information, but the structural template information that would allow a skilled forger to build convincing documents twice in the 3 weeks before the fabricated papers arrived in the board's inbox. The access had been logged to a secondary credential that technically belonged to the IT department, but had last been actively used by a name she recognized. She brought it to Damien at 2 in the afternoon. He looked at the access log she had printed. He read the name. He read it again. "Gordon Price," he said. "Board member, 14 months in the role. The one who had not confirmed the board's consensus position on the fabricated documents." Damien set the paper down. "He has been on the board since before I promoted you to senior assistant level," he said slowly. "Yes," she said. "He was positioned before this started," Damien said. "He's been inside the company for over a year." "Strategically placed," she said, "before any of this began." The scale of what Victor Salvatore had built, the patience of it, the long planning horizon, it landed fully in that moment, not as a theoretical concept, but as the concrete and specific reality of 14 months of preparation designed around a single anticipated outcome. "He planned for you," Sophia said quietly, "before the photograph, before any of this. He saw you long before you saw yourself." Damien looked at her. She meant he saw that you cared about someone before you admitted it to yourself. And Victor Salvatore, watching from the outside, had recognized it and had spent 14 months preparing to use it. The irony of it was specific and almost devastating. The person who had understood Damien Moretti's feelings for Sophia Bellini first was not Sophia and was not Damien. It was the man who wanted to destroy him. "Marcus needs to see this," Damien said. "Already sent," she said. 15 minutes ago. His head came up. "I sent it to Marcus directly before I brought it to you," she said. "He has the access log and a request for Gordon Price's credentialing history. I figured you'd want the full picture when I told you." Something moved through his expression. Something she had not seen before, or had not seen named quite this clearly before. He said quietly, "You did that before coming to me. You need information, not raw data. I gave you the finished picture." "You're not my assistant," he said. The words came out carefully, but they carried weight. "I know," she said. "You haven't been for a long time," he said. "I've just been calling you that." She looked at him. "What would you call it now?" she said. He held her gaze. "A partner," he said. "If you'll take the designation." The word sat between them, clean and direct, without theater or uncertainty. "I'll take it," she said. Marcus called back at 4. The credentialing history he had pulled confirmed that Gordon Price's secondary access had been active at precise intervals over 14 months, each access brief enough to avoid triggering the system's anomaly protocols. Someone with detailed knowledge of the company's security architecture had instructed Price on how to operate within the boundaries of what would go undetected. By 5:30, they had enough. Not everything, not the full case, not the complete picture that would make action irreversible, but enough to know that the structure of what Victor Salvatore had built was now visible to them. Enough to know that it was not as invisible as he believed. And enough to know that the next move belonged to them, not to him. Damien called his legal counsel at 6. Sophia stayed sitting across from him at his desk, listening while he outlined what they had found and began the conversation about what came next. At 7, his counsel hung up to begin her own work. Damien looked across the desk. "It's going to take time," he said. "I know. Victor will notice that Price hasn't reported back normally. He'll know something shifted. He'll adjust," she said. "So will we." Damien was quiet for a moment. "You weren't afraid today," he said. "I was afraid on Tuesday when you showed me those documents," she said. "I was afraid when I heard Salvatore's voice on my phone. The fear doesn't go away. You just don't let it do the steering." He looked at her for a long moment. "How did you learn to do that?" he said. "Same place you did," she said. "Work. Pay attention. Stop pretending things are simpler than they are." He almost smiled. The shadow of it moved across his face, and this time it stayed a little longer. "Go home," he said. "It's late." "You go home," she said. "I have one more thing. Sophia." 20 minutes, she said. "I want the Price access log annotated before I stop so it's ready tomorrow." He looked at her, and the expression on his face was the one she didn't have a name for, yet the one that was warmer and more complicated than anything she had seen from him before all of this started. It had something in it that looked she was beginning to think a great deal like the face a person makes when they are looking at the thing they were afraid of losing and finding it still there. 20 minutes, he said. 20 minutes, she confirmed. He got his jacket and his bag and stopped at her desk on the way to the elevator. She was already working. He stood there for a moment. "Thank you," he said. And this time it was different from the other times he had said it, not for the work, not for the professional precision, not for the competence she had always delivered without being asked. She looked up. "Don't thank me yet," she said. "We haven't won." "No," he said. "But we know exactly what we're fighting." He went to the elevator. She watched the doors close behind him. Then she turned back to the access log and kept working. Because that was what this was, not a story where someone swept in and made things right, but the real and unglamorous and deeply necessary work of two people who had decided without ever making a ceremony of it that they were in this together. Victor Salvatore had planned for Damien's feelings. He had not planned for what Sofia Bellini would do with hers. The annotated access log was ready by 7:40. Sofia sent it to Marcus, and to Damien's legal counsel, shut down her computer, and sat for a moment in the quiet of the empty executive floor. The cleaning crew hadn't come through yet. The overhead lights had dimmed to their after-hours setting. Outside the windows, Chicago was doing what it always did at this hour, luminous and indifferent and entirely unconcerned with the war being fought inside one of its glass towers. She gathered her things and went home. She slept well, which surprised her. She had expected the kind of night where the mind refuses to stop moving, where every scenario runs on a loop until the alarm sounds, and you realize you've been awake the entire time, rehearsing problems that will look different in daylight anyway. Instead, she slept deeply and woke at 6 with the specific clarity that comes from having made a decision and stood inside it fully. She had decided. She was in this. There was nothing left to calculate about that. What remained was the work. She arrived at the office at 8:15. Damien was already there. She could tell by the light under his office door, and the fact that Carla at the reception desk had the particular expression of someone who had been managing a high-energy presence since before her coffee was finished. Sofia acknowledged Carla with a nod, set her things down, and knocked on Damien's door. "Come in?" He was standing at his desk with 3 separate documents spread in front of him and his phone to his ear. He held up one finger when she entered a minute, and she sat down and waited, reading the documents upside down across the desk while he finished the call. Financial records. Real ones, not fabricated. Pulled from the company's actual accounts, printed with the transaction details and authorization chains intact. And beside them, the forged version side by side, so anyone looking could see exactly where the fabrication had been precise and exactly where it had been sloppy. Damien ended his call. "My counsel filed last night," he said without preamble. She moved quickly. "The formal complaint against Gordon Price is logged with the state's Financial Crimes Division as of 11 p.m. Sofia looked up. "That's faster than we planned." Victor will know by this morning at the latest, Damien said. I decided we didn't gain anything by waiting. Better to move before he can adjust his position. She looked at him carefully. What does moving now risk? He retaliates before we have the full case built, Damien said, which means the next few days are going to be aggressive. How aggressive? He looked at her directly. I need you to hear what I'm about to tell you and not argue about it until I've finished. That was not a sentence she had ever heard from him before. She sat back slightly. All right. Victor has 3 possible responses to learning Price is compromised, he said. The first is to go quiet and pull back, which is unlikely given his investment in this campaign. The second is to escalate the financial fraud narrative through other channels, different board members, industry press, regulatory bodies. The third is more direct. More direct, she said. He has people, Sophia, not administrative staff, not lawyers. He held her gaze. People. She was quiet. Marcus has expanded the security detail on this building, Damien said. Starting this morning, there is also a pause. I have arranged for someone to be with you when you're not here. She looked at him. A personal security presence, he said. Discreet. You won't see them most of the time. You arranged this without telling me, she said. I'm telling you now. You said you'd tell me everything as it happened. This happened at 6 this morning when I spoke to Marcus, he said. It is currently 8:17. I'm telling you now. She held his gaze for a moment. It was a fine line, and they both knew it, the line between keeping her informed and making decisions about her safety unilaterally. He had moved along it carefully, and she could see that, and she could also see that the decision itself was not unreasonable given what they knew. All right, she said. He blinked. Clearly, he had been prepared for more resistance. All right. You're not wrong about the risk, she said. I don't like it, but you're not wrong. We'll discuss the parameters of the arrangement, but yes. She met his eyes. I trust your read on this. Something in him settled. Not visibly, not in any dramatic way, but she had learned to see the small releases in him, the fractional changes in posture or expression that were the equivalent of someone else exhaling audibly. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me, she said. Just make sure whoever it is knows how to be invisible. I have a lunch meeting with the Kavanaugh account, and I don't need a shadow in the restaurant. They'll know, he said. She nodded once and looked back at the documents. Tell me the rest. There was more. Of course there was more. Damien had spent the early morning hours not sleeping, but building the same systematic, exhaustive approach he brought to every serious problem. The one that required total information before action and total conviction before commitment. He walked her through it now, the legal counsel's timeline. The contact his counsel had made with 2 federal investigators who had been building a parallel case against Salvatore Holdings for 18 months. The specific documentation they would need Sophia to authenticate as part of establishing that the fabricated financial records were not produced internally. She would need to provide a formal statement, on record. Her name attached to a legal process that would be visible and public, and would, if Victor Salvatore was inclined to escalate, make her specifically identifiable as the person who had helped bring the case against him. You understand what that means, Damien said. I understood it when I found the access logs, she said. I didn't stop. He looked at her. I'm not going to become smaller to make this easier, she said. That's not something I know how to do. He was quiet for a moment. I know, he said. And the way he said it, not admiringly, not with the particular quality of a person discovering something new, but with the settled certainty of someone describing a fact they had known for a long time, landed differently than almost anything else he had said to her. He had always known, from long before this, from long before the photograph and the phone call and everything that followed. He had known what she was, and chosen every day to have her beside him in the specific way he had constructed that would keep her at the most professional distance he could manage. She thought about that on the elevator down when she went to get them both coffee, a practical decision, That also gave her 90 seconds to herself. She thought he has known what she was for longer than she had known it herself. And then she thought they had both wasted a considerable amount of time. She came back up with 2 cups set, one on his desk without comment, and went to her own desk to begin the morning. At 10:15, Daniel Reeves called Damien. Sophia heard the call through the open connecting door and listened without moving, tracking the conversation by Damien's responses. Reeves had heard about the filing against Price. He was angry, not at Damien. The anger was pointed outward, at the violation of the board's integrity, and he wanted a full briefing. Damien arranged it for 2 that afternoon. At 11:40, Margaret Calloway sent an email to the full board. Sophia saw the copy come through. It was 4 sentences. It said that in light of the filing against Gordon Price, she was formally requesting an emergency board review of security protocols and board membership vetting processes, and that she moved to suspend Price's board participation pending resolution of the investigation. 3 other members confirmed within 12 minutes. Price himself sent nothing. At 12:30, Sophia's phone buzzed. Her personal cell. The number was unfamiliar again, but different from Salvatore's previous call. She looked at it for a moment, then she answered. The voice was not Salvatore's. It was a woman's voice. Precise, accented slightly, with the kind of careful English that comes from someone highly educated in a language that is not their first. Miss Bellini, my name is Elena Voss. I am Victor Salvatore's legal counsel. Sophia set down her pen. Ms. Voss, I am calling as a professional courtesy to inform you that my client is aware of the filing made this morning and wishes to communicate a formal position. His formal position, Sophia said, can be communicated through the appropriate legal channels. Yes, Voss said smoothly. It will be. I am calling in addition to that process because my client believes there may be information relevant to your decision-making that has not been shared with you by your employer. Sophia's hand tightened slightly around the phone. What information? My client has documentation, Voss said, that he is prepared to release publicly if the current legal process is not withdrawn. Documentation regarding the nature of Mr. Moretti's business interests that extends beyond what has been disclosed in public filings. Documentation that would cause considerable damage to his professional standing and potentially expose him to federal scrutiny in areas that have nothing to do with the current filing. Sophia was quiet. He is not threatening Mr. Moretti's freedom, Voss said with the careful emphasis of someone reading from a prepared statement. He is suggesting that certain information in context might be damaging to his reputation and to his relationships with business partners who may not be aware of the full scope of his activities. He's threatening to expose information about Damien to federal investigators, Sophia said. If we don't withdraw the case, my client would characterize it differently. I know how your client would characterize it, Sophia said. I'm characterizing it accurately. A pause. Ms. Voss, you're a lawyer. You understand that what you've just described is obstruction. A brief silence. Miss Bellini, you're also calling my personal cell, which means your client obtained that number through means that will be part of the documentation we've already provided to the State Financial Crimes Division. She kept her voice completely level. I'm going to end this call now. If your client has a legal position, he can communicate it through counsel to our counsel. If he releases any documentation regarding Moretti Industries or its principals, we will add that action to the existing filing and pursue it accordingly. She ended the call. She sat for 3 seconds. Then she stood up, walked into Damien's office and said, Salvatore just made contact through his lawyer. He was on his feet by the time she finished the word lawyer. She told him. All of it word for word, exactly as she had told him the direct call 3 days ago. She watched his face while she spoke, and this time what she saw was different from anything she had seen before. Not the controlled anger from the morning of the photograph, not the dangerous stillness of someone applying force to keep themselves contained. This was cold, not in the emotional sense, in the operational sense. The coldness of someone who has received information and is processing it with total clarity and zero interference from anything other than the problem itself. It was she understood what he looked like when he was genuinely dangerous. "He has documentation," Damien said. "That's what Voss said. Real documentation." "I don't know," Sophia said. "It may be fabricated the same way the financial records were. Or it may be real, and maybe context he's stripped of meaning to make it look like something it's not. Or," she paused, "or it's real and it means something." He looked at her. She held his gaze. "I told you I wanted everything." "There are things," he said carefully, "that fall into a category that—" "Damien." He stopped. "I have been beside you for 3 years," she said. "I am not naive about the world you operate in. I am not asking for a confession or a complete accounting of everything you've ever done. I am asking whether Victor Salvatore has something real." A long silence. "He may," Damien said. "What kind of real? Old?" he said. "From before certain decisions were made. From a period when the line between certain activities was not drawn in the same place it's drawn now." He held her gaze with something in his that she recognized as the face of a person standing on the edge of the most honest thing they have ever said. "I am not the same operator I was 7 years ago. The company is not what it was then. But documentation from that period without context, without the arc of what followed, could be made to look like something ongoing," she said. "Yes." She absorbed this. "Is it something the federal investigators already know about?" she said. A pause. "The investigators who've been building the case against Salvatore," he said carefully, "have had conversations with my counsel in the past about areas of mutual interest. There are things that fall within the scope of those conversations, and things that are separate. So some of it they know," she said, "and some of it they may not." "It's possible." She stood up and walked to the window, not because she needed to look at anything outside, but because she needed to move to give the information room to settle before she responded to it. She stood with her back to him for a moment, and he let her, which was the right thing to do. Then she turned around. "You need to call your counsel right now and tell her about the call I received," she said, "before anything else. Victor just showed his hand because he's scared the filing panicked him and he moved faster than he should have. That call is evidence of his willingness to obstruct." "I know," he said. "The documentation threat may be real or it may be a bluff, but either way, proactively putting your counsel in contact with the federal investigators about the context of whatever he might release is better than letting him release it without that context." "I know," he said again. "Call her," Sophia said. He was already reaching for his phone. Then he stopped. "Sophia." She looked at him. "What I just told you is between us," she said. "It always will be." He looked at her for a moment. One of those moments she had stopped trying to categorize because they were too specific to fit any category she had built before this. Then he nodded once and made the call. She went back to her desk and sat down, and did not allow herself to think about anything other than what came next. Not what it meant that he had just told her something he had probably never told anyone. Not what it cost him. Not what it meant that she hadn't blinked. Those were things for later. Right now, there was work. The board meeting at 2 was the most serious room Sophia had sat in during her 3 years at the company. Not because of dramatic confrontation. It wasn't that kind of meeting. It was serious. The way a surgical consultation is serious. The particular gravity of people who understand what they're dealing with and are dispensing with everything except the actual substance. Damien presented the case against Price with a completeness that left no room for ambiguity. The access logs, the timeline, the correlation between Price's credential use and the fabricated documents' appearance, the formal filing, the federal investigators' involvement. She sat at the end of the table and watched the board absorb it. Daniel Reeves asked the first question, which was about the company's exposure. Damien's counsel answered it cleanly. Margaret Calloway asked the second, which was about Sophia. She asked it directly, looking at Sophia rather than at Damien in the way of a woman who has decided she wants the answer from the primary source. "The documents named you," Calloway said. "Specifically, has that affected your ability to work?" No, Sophia said. Has it affected your confidence in your role here? It hasn't changed what I know about my work, Sophia said. The records of what I've actually done in this company are complete and accurate and available for any board member who wants to review them. What someone fabricated doesn't alter what actually exists. Calloway looked at her for a moment. Then she nodded with the specific kind of nod that means a person has decided something and is registering the decision internally. Gordon Price's chair sat empty. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. At the end of it, the board issued a formal statement of confidence in Damien's leadership and a formal suspension of Price pending investigation. They also voted without being asked and without significant deliberation to increase the board's independent security vetting process for all future members. 4 votes confirmed immediately. 1 abstained, a man named Harrison, whom Sophia had always found difficult to read, and who said only that he needed more time with the documentation before voting. She noted this, filed it, did not mention it yet. After the board cleared, Damien's counsel stayed behind for 20 minutes. Sophia sat through the tail end of that conversation, and at the point where the counsel described the federal investigator's response to the information about Salvatore's call to Elena Voss, something shifted in the room. They want to move, counsel said. What happened with the Voss call accelerated their timeline. They've been building for 18 months and they believe they're close. Salvatore's obstruction attempt gives them a new angle and they want to use it. How quickly? Damien said. 2 weeks. Maybe less. What do they need? Miss Bellini's formal statement, counsel said. Her testimony regarding both calls, the direct call from Salvatore and the Voss call this afternoon. She is a direct witness to attempted obstruction. That's significant. Damien looked at Sophia. When do they need it? She said. They'd like to meet within 48 hours. Schedule it, she said. Damien held her gaze across the table. Something in his face had the quality of a man who keeps being surprised by the same thing and is gradually understanding that it was never going to surprise him if he had been paying the right kind of attention from the beginning. Council left at 4:30. The floor was quiet. The board members had gone. The regular staff had filtered out with the end of the formal workday. It was Damien and Sophia, and the specific quality of silence that a room has after a significant event when the air is still carrying what was said, and everyone in it can feel it. Damien was gathering the board documents when Sophia said, "Harrison." He looked up. He abstained, she said. He didn't say he needed more information from Damien. He said he needed more time with the documentation. He already had it. He's had it since this morning. Damien went still. He's not undecided, she said. He's waiting. For what? To see which way this goes, she said. If Salvatore wins, Harrison wants to have a record of not having voted against him. If we win, he votes confirmation and claims he was being methodical. She paused. He's been hedging since before the meeting started. Damien looked at her. Is he feeding Victor information? He said. I don't know, she said honestly. He may simply be a coward rather than a collaborator. But I'd have Marcus pull his access history the same way we pulled Price's. A beat of silence. Done, Damien said, reaching for his phone. Not tonight, she said. Tomorrow. Tonight you go home and sleep because the next 2 weeks are going to be brutal, and you running on empty doesn't help either of us. He looked at her. You're telling me to sleep. I'm telling you that we've done everything that can be done today, she said, and that the work that remains requires you to be fully functional, which requires rest, which you are bad at doing voluntarily. He was quiet for a moment. You've noticed that? I've noticed everything, she said. For 3 years. You're not the only one who was paying attention. Something happened in his face then, not the almost smile she had seen before, something slower and more complete, something that didn't leave after a second. He set down the documents he was holding. Sophia, he said. His voice was different from any other iteration of her name she had heard from him. Lower. Without the professional register, he wore the way other men wore ties. When this is over, she said. "We will have a conversation that has nothing to do with Victor Salvatore, or board meetings or legal filings. He stopped, tried again. "I want to be clear about something. Before the next 2 weeks happen and everything becomes operational." She looked at him and waited. "What I said to you," he said, "in this office, about the photograph and about why it bothered me, and what I said about a partner." He held her gaze without flinching. "That was not a professional statement." "I know," she said. "And it is not conditional," he said, "on the outcome of any of this, on whether we win the next 2 weeks or lose them. It is not something I said because the circumstances made it convenient, or because I needed you to stay." "I know that too," she said. "I want to make sure," he said. She crossed the space between them, not hurried, not dramatic, and she stood close enough that she could see the specific quality of his expression, without distance, softening it. "Damien," she said, "I walked into your office 2 weeks ago and made you say out loud what you felt. I did that knowing exactly what world you operate in. I did it knowing Victor Salvatore had been watching for 14 months. I did it knowing that being close to you was going to mean standing in something difficult." She held his gaze. "I did it anyway. That should tell you what you need to know about whether you need to keep clarifying." He looked at her for a long moment. "It does," he said. "Good," she said. She stepped back and picked up her bag. "Go home," she said. "Sleep." "You first," he said. She almost laughed. Not quite. But something warm moved through her chest and settled there. "Fine. Together." They walked to the elevator. The same walk they had taken dozens of times, the same distance, the same familiar architecture of two people moving through the same space at the end of a day. Except that his hand found hers somewhere between the elevator doors closing and the lobby light coming into view. And neither of them said anything about it, and neither of them let go. They stood in the lobby for a moment, both their cars waiting. 48 hours, she said. "The federal investigators." "I know." "And Marcus pulls Harrison's records tomorrow. First thing. And we briefed the legal counsel on the obstruction timeline before the investigators' meeting. Already scheduled." He paused. "Are you done with the operational checklist?" She considered. "For tonight." "Good," he said. And the word had warmth in it that had nothing to do with strategy or planning or the long and serious work ahead of them. She started toward her car. "Sophia." She turned. He was looking at her with the expression she had finally found a name for, not today, not in this moment, but sometime in the previous 2 weeks, accumulating through cups of tea and honest conversations, and the specific way he had stood in the board meeting with absolute certainty about her integrity, when a single wavering would have been easier. It was the face of someone who has decided, not tentatively, not with the careful provisional quality of someone who might revise the decision when circumstances shifted. Decided the way important things are decided, completely, and without an exit built in. "Tomorrow," he said, "we finish this." She looked back at him. "We already started," she said. She got in her car. On the drive home, she didn't rehearse scenarios or run through the checklist of the next 48 hours or try to game out Victor Salvatore's possible responses to what was coming at him. She did something she rarely allowed herself to do in the middle of a serious situation. She let herself feel the weight of the day, all of it, the difficulty and the fear and the solid reality of what she had stood in and not been broken by. She let herself feel what it meant that he had told her the truth about the old documentation and trusted her with it and watched her face carefully to see if she would flinch. She hadn't. And she thought about Victor Salvatore, who had spent 14 months planning around a weakness. He had been right that Damien Moretti had one. He had correctly identified it from the outside, which was a remarkable piece of intelligence gathering. What he had miscalculated was the nature of the weakness itself. He had built a campaign designed to use Sophia Bellini as leverage against Damien, a pressure point, a crack in the structure. He had assumed that love, or whatever word applied to what existed between them, was something that made a person more vulnerable, more exposed, more likely to make mistakes from emotion rather than judgment. He had spent 14 months and considerable resources on that assumption. He was about to find out how wrong it was. Sophia pulled into her building's garage, parked, and sat for a moment in the quiet. Then she went upstairs, made tea, and went to bed. Tomorrow, they were going to finish it. She was at her desk by 7:45, not because she had been told to be. Not because the schedule required it, because something in her had woken up at 6 with the particular clarity of a person who knows that the day ahead is going to be one of the ones that matters, and lying in bed rehearsing it was less useful than being in the room where it was going to happen. Damien arrived at 7:58. He saw her at her desk and stopped for exactly 1 second. Not surprised, she didn't think he was capable of genuine surprise at her professional dedication anymore, but registering something. The fact of her being there. The fact that she had understood without being told that today required early. Counsel confirmed the investigators' meeting for 10, he said. I saw the email at 6:30, she said. I've prepared a written summary of both calls, the Salvatore call and the Voss call, with timestamps, exact phrasing as I recalled it, and the sequence of events. I thought it would be more useful than relying entirely on verbal testimony. He looked at the folder she slid across the desk to him. He opened it, read the first page, then the second. This is thorough, he said. It needs to be, she said. They've been building for 18 months. I don't want to hand them something loose. He closed the folder and looked at her. How long did this take you? I started at 6:40, she said. It took about an hour. He was quiet for a moment. Go get coffee, she said. You look like you slept 4 hours. 6, he said. That's still not enough, she said. Go. He went. She turned back to her screen and pulled up the Harrison Access report that Marcus had sent at 7:15. She had been working through it since she arrived, and what she had found was sitting in her chest with the specific weight of information that changes the shape of something you thought you understood. Harrison's credential access history was clean. Nothing like prices. No anomalous pulls, no unusual system entries, no pattern that corresponded to the fabricated documents or to anything else in the Salvatore campaign's timeline. Which should have been reassuring. It wasn't, because what Marcus's report had also pulled at Sophia's request was Harrison's external communication log, not the content of his communications, which required a different authorization level, but the metadata. Times, frequency, duration. Who he was calling and when. There was a number that appeared 8 times in the past 3 weeks. She had run it through the company's standard contact verification system, and it had come back clean. A law firm, a mid-sized practice specializing in corporate restructuring. Unremarkable on its face. She had then done something she hadn't done through the company system. She had searched the firm's client list through public filings. It had taken 20 minutes. The firm represented 4 clients in active matters. 3 of them were routine corporate work. The 4th was Salvatore Holdings. Damien came back with 2 cups. He set one in front of her and looked at her face. What did you find? He said. She turned her screen toward him. He read it. She watched him read it. She watched the stillness that moved through him, the specific operational cold she had seen yesterday when she told him about the Voss call settling into his posture like something hardening. He's not a collaborator, she said. Not in the active sense. He hasn't fed Victor anything directly. But he's been in contact with Salvatore's legal firm 8 times in 3 weeks, which means he's been receiving information. He knows something about Victor's position that the rest of the board doesn't. He's been told how to vote, Damien said, or told what the consequences are of voting the wrong way, she said. Victor has been running the same playbook with him that he tried to run with me. Find the pressure point. Apply it quietly. Wait for the response. Damien straightened up. What's Harrison's pressure point? He said. I don't know yet, she said. But Victor does. A pause. We need to move this morning, Damien said. Before the investigators' meeting. I want Harrison in this office before 9. Agreed, she said. But carefully. If he knows we've pulled his metadata, he panics. If he panics, he calls the firm and Victor knows we're on to the Harrison angle before we've had a chance to use it. Damien looked at her. So we don't tell him what we know, he said. We bring him in on a pretext. The board statement from yesterday, she said. Tell him you want to go through it before it's formally filed. He has reason to meet with you. He abstained, which means he technically hasn't closed his position. It's entirely natural for you to want to discuss it with him before the record is finalized. Damien was already reaching for his phone. Harrison arrived at 8:40. Sophia had positioned herself at her desk, which was within clear sightline of the open space where Harrison would pass on his way to Damien's office, and she watched him when he came through. He was a man in his early 60s, silver-haired, with the kind of tailored composure that very expensive educations produce. He had been on the board for 14 months, and in that time had voted without incident on every matter except the one that happened to implicate his private arrangement with Victor Salvatore's legal firm. He walked past her desk with a nod that was precisely calibrated, not warm, not cold, the kind of social nod that means a person is maintaining all available options. She nodded back. He went into Damien's office. She pulled up her audio through the system Damien had authorized her access to the office intercom years ago for exactly these kinds of meetings, so she could take notes without being physically present and listened. The first 4 minutes were professional and unremarkable. Damien walked Harrison through the board statement language. Harrison asked 2 questions about the phrasing of the confidence vote, standard board process. Then Damien said, I want to ask you something directly, Robert, and I'd appreciate a direct answer. A pause. Of course, Harrison said. Are you in contact with anyone outside this company who has an interest in the outcome of the current situation? A longer pause. That's a broad question, Harrison said carefully. It's a specific question, Damien said. I'm asking it broadly to give you the opportunity to answer it honestly before I ask it specifically. The silence that followed was 11 seconds. Sophia counted. I've received some communication, Harrison said finally. From whom? Another pause. Legal representatives of a party with interests in Chicago's development sector, Harrison said. Elena Voss, Damien said. The silence this time was complete. How did you? Harrison started. Robert, Damien said, and his voice had the quality she had learned to recognize as his most serious register, not loud, not theatrical, simply immovable. I am going to tell you something, and I need you to hear it fully. Federal investigators have been building a case against Victor Salvatore for 18 months. Yesterday, those investigators received documentation of Salvatore's legal counsel making an obstruction attempt directed at a witness in that case. The case is, as of this morning, substantially closer to prosecution than it was 48 hours ago. Anyone who has been in contact with Salvatore or his representatives during this period, and who has not disclosed that contact, is going to be examined as part of that investigation. Another silence. I'm not Victor's man, Harrison said. His voice had changed. The tailored composure had something underneath it now. I want to be clear about that. Then what are you? Damien said. I was approached, Harrison said. 3 weeks ago, I was told I was given information about certain historical matters involving this company. Information that was framed as evidence of wrongdoing. I was told that if I did not cooperate, if I did not provide certain voting outcomes at the board level, this information would be passed to regulatory bodies. Damien was quiet. They were threatening you, he said. Yes, Harrison said. And now the composure was gone entirely, and what was underneath it was something Sophia recognized as a man who has been carrying something alone and is exhausted by the weight of it. I didn't know what to do. I'm not equipped for this kind of situation, Damien. I'm a corporate governance specialist. I've been on 6 boards in 20 years, and the most serious thing I've encountered was a CFO who was padding his expense account. What did they ask you to do? Vote against the confidence motion, Harrison said. Introduce a motion to suspend Miss Bellini's access pending the financial investigation. And if the vote to file against Price passed abstain rather than confirm to create the appearance of division on the board. Silence. You did the last one, Damien said. Yes, Harrison said. I'm sorry, I panicked. I thought if I abstained rather than voted against, I was doing the minimum, keeping them from pushing further without actively harming the company. You need to make a formal statement, Damien said, to the federal investigators, today. What you've just told me constitutes witness intimidation, and your testimony about the specific demands they made is significant. If you do that, you are cooperating with a federal investigation, Damien said, which is considerably better than the alternative. A long pause. Will it? Harrison stopped. Will it affect my position on the board? That depends on the board, Damien said. I can't speak for them, but I can tell you that the conversation we're having right now and whether you choose to do the right thing in the next 2 hours will matter. Sophia heard Harrison exhale. All right, he said. All right, I'll speak to them. She was already calling Damien's counsel before the sentence was finished. Harrison left at 9:20 accompanied by Marcus and a contact from the counsel's office who would handle his coordination with the federal investigators. He looked as he passed her desk like a man who had just set down something very heavy and was not entirely sure his legs remembered how to work without the weight. Sophia watched him go. Then she turned to find Damien standing in his doorway. You heard all of it, he said. Yes. They wanted to suspend your access, he said. I heard. His jaw was set. Not at her, she knew the direction of it. They were going to use the board to marginalize you, make it look like an internal governance decision, not an external attack. I know, she said. It was a good plan. If it had worked, it would have been very difficult to reverse without making it look like you were protecting me at the company's expense. She paused. Victor understands how optics work. He won't when this is finished, Damien said. She looked at him. The investigators' meeting is in 35 minutes. He nodded. Are you ready? I've been ready since 6:40, she said. The meeting with the federal investigators was held at a law office 3 blocks from Moretti Industries on a floor that was entirely taken up by the kind of serious legal work that happens out of the public eye. 2 investigators, a man named Pierce and a woman named Diaz, both of whom had the specific quality of people who have spent years in serious rooms and have stopped being impressed by anything that isn't actual substance. Sophia gave her statement. The Salvatore call first, then the Voss call, working through each one with the precision of the written summary she had prepared at 6 that morning. Pierce asked follow-up questions. Diaz recorded and occasionally interjected with clarifications. Sophia answered everything directly without elaboration, beyond what was relevant, without the social hedging that people sometimes default to in formal settings. Halfway through the Voss call account, Pierce looked up from his notes. You told Voss that the call itself constituted evidence, he said. Yes, Sophia said. During the call. Yes. You told her while she was still on the line that you would report the conversation to your legal counsel and that it would be added to the existing filing. Yes, she said. Pierce looked at Diaz. Something passed between them that Sophia couldn't fully read. Miss Bellini, Diaz said. Are you aware that in doing so, you essentially locked in her acknowledgement that the call was happening? She didn't deny it, correct. She didn't claim she was calling for any other reason. She said my client would characterize it differently, Sophia said. But she didn't deny the substance of what I said. Which means her response combined with your characterization of the call is effectively a documented admission, Diaz said. That's useful. I know, Sophia said. That's why I said it while she was still on the line. Another look between Pierce and Diaz. Damien sitting beside her said nothing, but she felt something shift in his posture beside her, not surprise. Something closer to the expression she had seen when he said, "You're not my assistant," in his office. The recognition of something he already knew being confirmed in a new context. The meeting ran 2 hours. Harrison's statement arrived midway through via the counsel's office and was incorporated into the session in real time. By the time Pierce and Diaz finished, the architecture of the case had changed visibly, even to Sophia's non-legal eye. The 18 months of investigation they had carried in had been joined to the specific recent documented obstruction attempts, and the combination was the thing Pierce had called quietly and without drama actionable. They were ready to move. Not today, not tomorrow, but within the week. They would coordinate timing with counsel, and they needed Damien's confirmation on 2 specific documents from the company's historical records that they wanted to contextualize, and then they were going to close. Damien confirmed the documents. On the way back to the office in the car, he was quiet. Not the operational silence. Something more personal. The thing Pierce said, he said at last. About you locking in the admission during the call. Yes. That was deliberate, he said. You thought of it in real time while Voss was on the phone and you did it. Yes, she said. That, he said, is why Victor Salvatore miscalculated. She looked at him. He built a campaign around you being a vulnerability, Damien said. He studied what I felt and concluded that it made me weaker. He never considered. He stopped, started again. He built for one variable. He didn't account for you being the one thing you actually are. Which is what? She said. Exactly as dangerous as I am, he said. In a completely different way. She looked at him for a moment. Not dangerous, she said. Prepared. There's a difference. Not much of one, he said. She almost smiled. Don't tell Victor that. It would ruin his entire strategic model. He did smile. Fully without the shadow quality she was used to. It changed his face in a way she had not seen before, and she let herself look at it directly, without filing it away, without the old habit of sealing things behind professionalism. They reached the building. The next 4 days were the fastest and most demanding of Sophia's professional life. The legal machinery moved the way serious legal machinery moves when it has been building for a long time, and finally has everything it needs. Not dramatically. Not with the theatrical quality of what people imagine when they think about these moments, but with a grinding, total, inexorable precision. Documents filed, subpoenas issued, accounts frozen, counsel coordinated across 3 separate jurisdictions. Sophia worked 18-hour days and didn't feel them. Not because the exhaustion wasn't real, it was, but because the work was absorbing in the complete way that important work is absorbing, the kind that doesn't leave room for anything peripheral. Damien worked beside her, not as her boss, as her partner in the specific and unambiguous meaning of the word they had settled on. On the 2nd day, the first public reports appeared. Not about Salvatore Holdings, those were still under wraps pending the formal action, but about Gordon Price, whose board suspension had been public record since the board's formal vote, and whose connection to fabricated financial documents was now appearing in the business press, in the careful language of people who know something is coming but can't yet say what. The 4th story in the 3rd outlet mentioned Sophia by name. Not negatively, the opposite, actually describing the document analysis that had identified the fabrication as the work of someone with strong forensic financial skills. It was a small mention, a paragraph, but it was accurate. She read it at her desk and felt something she hadn't expected to feel, the specific quiet relief of a record being corrected publicly. Not loudly, not dramatically, just corrected. Damien read it too. He said nothing about it, but he set a cup of tea on her desk at 3:45 exactly the way he had the first time, and she understood that he had read it. On the 3rd day, Gordon Price retained separate legal counsel and began cooperating with federal investigators. The domino quality of it was not lost on Sophia. Price's cooperation opened documentation that Salvatore's team had clearly assumed was protected. Names, transaction records, communication logs. The 18 months of investigative work that Pierce and Diaz had been building found new structural support, and the case expanded in real time in ways that made what had started as a targeted corporate harassment campaign look like a significantly smaller component of a much larger pattern. Victor Salvatore had been doing this for years, not just to Damien, to others before him. The same architecture, find the soft point place the inside source apply. Graduated pressure escalate when resistance appeared. Chicago was not the first city, and Moretti Industries was not the first target. When Damien told her this at 9 at night on the third day, sitting across from each other with the remains of dinner that Marcus had sent up because neither of them had left the building since morning, she was quiet for a moment. "He's done this before," she said. "At least twice that they can document," Damien said. "Possibly more." "And it worked," she said. "The other times." Yes, she thought about that. About the other companies, the other people, the other soft points that Victor Salvatore had found and pressed on until something broke. People who hadn't had the specific combination of factors that had been present here. "We got lucky," she said. "In some ways." Damien looked at her. "Which ways?" "The photograph was taken by a charity event photographer and posted publicly," she said. "If it had stayed private, you might have had the same feelings, and Victor might have known about them. But there would have been no incident to use as a starting point. No phone call. No conversation in your office." She paused. "None of what changed between us might have happened in time." He was quiet for a moment. "Lucas Ferraro," he said. "We should probably send him something," she said. "He has no idea he was the inciting event for a federal investigation." Damien made a sound that was definitively a laugh. Not the shadow of one. A real one. Brief, but real. She stored it. She would remember it exactly. On the fourth day the action came. Not dramatically. Not the way it happens in movies with the noise and the spectacle of it. Quietly in the early morning, through the legal channels that had been preparing for months. Salvatore Holdings was served. Accounts were frozen pending investigation. Victor Salvatore was formally notified through his legal counsel, not Elena Voss, who had retained her own separate counsel within 24 hours of the obstruction documentation being filed, that he was the subject of a federal investigation spanning 3 jurisdictions. Pierce called Damien at 7:43 in the morning. Damien put the call on speaker so Sophia could hear it. "We're moving," Pierce said. "I wanted to let you know before it became public. You and Miss Bellini should be aware that there will be press interest within the next few hours." "We're prepared," Damien said. "Miss Bellini's statement was significant," Pierce said. "I want that on record. The Voss call documentation changed the timeline of what we could do. If she hadn't documented it the way she did." "She did," Damien said. "Yes," Pierce said. "She did." The call ended. Sophia sat for a moment. Then she said, "We need a press statement, before the story breaks." "Already drafted," Damien said. "Counsel sent it at 6. I want your eyes on it before it goes." She read it. She made 3 specific changes, a word here, a sentence restructured there. One paragraph that she cut entirely because it explained something that didn't need explaining. Damien reviewed her changes without comment and sent the draft back to counsel with her edits incorporated. The statement went out at 9:15. By 10, the business press had picked up the federal action. By noon, it was in the mainstream outlets. By 2, Sophia's phone had 17 messages from people she hadn't spoken to in months. She didn't answer most of them. She answered Lucas Ferraro's. His text said, "Saw the news. Are you okay? I feel like I should apologize for something, but I'm not sure what." She typed back, "You should not apologize for anything. Also, you may have accidentally saved a federal investigation. I'll explain sometime over dinner." His response was a string of question marks, and then, "You live a very interesting life, Sophia Bellini." She was smiling at her phone when Damien appeared at her desk. "Lucas," he said. "He's confused about his role in all of this," she said. Damien looked at her phone for a moment, then at her. "Tell him the dinner is on me." She looked up. "You want to buy Lucas Ferraro dinner." "He started it," Damien said with a complete absence of irony that was somehow more genuinely funny than anything deliberate could have been. She laughed. A real one, unguarded, the kind she had laughed the night of the gala, with Lucas's arm around her shoulder. The laugh that had been captured in a photograph, and sent to a man who is now facing federal investigators in 3 jurisdictions. Damien watched her laugh, and his expression was the one she had named the decided one, and it was fully settled in his face without any of the restraint she used to see around it. The afternoon was the first afternoon in 3 weeks that did not require crisis management. Legal counsel handled the press inquiries. Marcus managed building security, which was now reduced from its elevated footing. The board, minus Price, minus Harrison, who had been asked to take a temporary leave pending review of his independent position, minus the abstention that no longer existed, issued a statement of full confidence in the company's leadership and direction. At 4:15, Margaret Calloway called Sophia directly. Sophia answered. "Miss Bellini," Calloway said, "I want to say something that I should have said before the board meeting 3 days ago." "You don't need to." "I do," Calloway said. "The documents that were circulated, the implications about your role here. I want you to know that I did not believe them, not for a moment. And I want you to know that because it matters to say it, not just to think it." Sophia was quiet for a moment. "Thank you, Margaret," she said. "You're a very capable woman," Calloway said. "Damien is lucky you stayed." "I'm lucky I had reason to," Sophia said. After she hung up, she sat for a moment and looked at her hands flat on the desk. 3 weeks ago, she had sat in this chair and received a phone call from Victor Salvatore and felt the specific cold of being used as a weapon. She had felt it clearly and precisely, and had then gotten up and walked into Damien's office and told him. She thought about that version of herself, the one who had made the decision to not go around the fear but straight through it every single time. The one who had demanded honesty from a man who was built to manage rather than reveal, and had gotten it and had given it back, and had built something in the exchange that neither fabricated documents nor federal obstruction attempts had been able to touch. She heard Damien's office door open behind her. He came to her desk. He had his jacket over his arm. His workday was finished for the first time in 3 weeks, in the way a workday actually finishes, not because there was nothing left to handle, but because what remained could wait until tomorrow without consequence. "Are you done?" he said. She looked around her desk, everything filed, everything logged, everything exactly as it should be. "Yes," she said. "Good," he said. "There's somewhere I want to take you." She looked up at him. "Where?" "Dinner," he said. "A real one. Not at a desk, not with a crisis on the other side of the evening, not as a professional engagement." She stood up and gathered her things. "You're asking me to dinner," she said. "I am," he said. "Was that difficult?" "Considerably," he said. "Don't make it worse." She looked at him for a moment. This man who had spent 3 years managing the most carefully controlled distance she had ever encountered, and who had dismantled it piece by piece over the past 3 weeks, under circumstances that would have broken most people. Who had told her the truth when it cost him? Who had stood in a board meeting and staked the company's standing on her integrity without being asked? Who had put a cup of tea on her desk in the dark and let that say everything that words would have gotten wrong? "Damien," she said. He looked at her. "Yes," she said. He understood that she meant the dinner and everything around it, everything that the dinner represented and led toward, and was the beginning of. He understood because he had always understood her from the first year, in the specific way that 2 people understand each other when they have been paying the right kind of attention. They walked to the elevator. In the lobby, he held the door the way he always had a reflex of formality that she had stopped registering long ago and had started registering again in the past weeks with entirely new awareness. The city outside was doing what it always did. Indifferent, luminous, enormous, unconcerned. The car was waiting. As they reached it, Sophia's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen out of habit. It was a news alert. The headline read, "Salvatore Holdings CEO faces federal charges as investigation widens." She showed it to Damien. He looked at it for 1 moment. Then he reached over and turned her phone face down gently without comment and opened the car door for her. She got in. He got in beside her. "Where are we going?" she said. "There's a restaurant I've wanted to take you to for about 2 years," he said. She looked at him. 2 years. "I was working on timing," he said. "For 2 years." "The timing is better now," he said. She turned to look out the window at the city moving past, and she thought about a photograph that had been taken at a charity gala by a photographer who hadn't known what he was documenting. A photograph of 2 childhood friends laughing, captured in a golden moment, sent to a man who had looked at it in the early hours of morning and felt the world shift under him. A photograph that had started a phone call, and the phone call had started a conversation, and the conversation had started something that Victor Salvatore's 14 months of preparation and all his resources and all his strategy had not managed to stop. She thought about what Damien had said in the car. He didn't account for you being the one thing you actually are. She had been that thing all along. Before the photograph, before the phone call, before any of it. She had been exactly herself, sitting at a desk outside a powerful man's office, managing the impossible architecture of his world, never asking to be seen, and never agreeing to be invisible. And in the end, the thing that Victor Salvatore had called a weakness had been the only thing that couldn't be broken, fabricated, bought, threatened, or used. Not love as a vulnerability. Love as the one force in Damien Moretti's carefully constructed world that had made him, for the first time in a very long time, impossible to reach. The car moved through Chicago, and the city went on. And beside her, Damien Moretti sat exactly as he always sat, steady, contained, completely certain of himself in all the ways that were native to him, except that his hand found hers in the dark of the back seat, and he did not let go, and he did not qualify it, and he did not manage it into something smaller than what it was. The man who had once said "delete it now" had become, without ceremony and without a single wasted word, the man who would spend the rest of his life making sure there was nothing between them left to erase.